Captain Marcus Chen had seen many strange things during his 15 years of military service, but nothing could have prepared him for this moment. He stood in the grand crystalline hall of the Zephyrian Empire's flagship, watching as dozens of the most beautiful alien females he had ever imagined displayed themselves before him and 11 other human diplomats. The hall itself was a marvel of alien engineering. Crystal pillars stretched up toward a domed ceiling that seemed to capture and magnify starlight from the void outside. The floor beneath his feet was smooth as polished marble but warm to the touch, emanating a soft blue glow that made everything in the room appear ethereal and dreamlike. But it was not the architecture that held everyone's attention. The Zephyrian females were breathtaking in ways that human language struggled to describe. They stood nearly 7 feet tall with slender, graceful forms that moved like dancers even when standing still. Their skin had a subtle luminescent quality, shifting between pale gold and soft silver depending on how the light touched them. Their eyes were large and expressive, colored in shades of deep violet and emerald green that seemed to hold depths of ancient wisdom and mystery. Each female wore flowing garments that seemed to be made from liquid light itself, changing colors and patterns as they moved. Their hair cascaded down their backs in waves of midnight black or platinum silver, some adorned with what appeared to be living flowers that glowed with their own inner fire. When they spoke, their voices were like music, melodic and hypnotic in a way that made human hearts race and minds grow fuzzy with desire. Marcus watched as his fellow diplomats stood transfixed by the display before them. Ambassador Richardson, from the European Union, could not take his eyes off a particularly stunning Zephyrian, with silver hair who smiled at him with lips that seemed to shine like pearls. Colonel Davidson from the American delegation was already moving toward a golden-skinned beauty, whose violet eyes promised pleasures beyond imagination. One by one, the other humans were making their selections, drawn forward by desires they seemed unable to resist. This was the Unity Bonding Ceremony, a tradition the Zephyrian Empire claimed would strengthen the alliance between their species and humanity. Each human diplomat would choose a Zephyrian partner, and together, they would serve as bridges between their civilizations. It was supposed to be an honor, a chance to forge bonds that would ensure peace and prosperity for both species across the galaxy. But something felt wrong to Marcus. Maybe it was his military training that had taught him to look for threats even in seemingly peaceful situations. Maybe it was the instinct that had kept him alive through 3 different wars on distant planets. Or maybe it was just the simple fact that everything seemed too perfect, too easy, too good to be true. As he stood there watching his colleagues, become increasingly mesmerized by the beautiful aliens before them, Marcus let his gaze wander beyond the main group. The Zephyrian females in the front rows were clearly the stars of this show, positioning themselves to catch the attention of the human visitors. They preened and posed with practiced grace, their every movement calculated to entrance and seduce. But in the shadows at the very back of the great hall, Marcus noticed something that made him pause. There, sitting alone on a simple stone bench, was another Zephyrian female who was clearly different from the others. Where the others were tall and elegant, she appeared shorter and more compact. Where their skin glowed with perfect luminescence, hers was mottled and scarred, marked with patches of darker coloration that looked almost like old burns or acid damage. Her hair was not the flowing cascade of silk that adorned the others, but rather a shorter, more practical style that framed a face that could only be described as plain by Zephyrian standards. She wore simple gray robes instead of the flowing garments of light that the other females displayed, and she sat with her head bent over what appeared to be some kind of data pad or electronic device. Marcus found himself studying her more closely. While the other Zephyrian females focused entirely on attracting the attention of the human males, this one in the back seemed completely absorbed in whatever information she was reviewing on her device. Her fingers moved quickly over its surface, and Marcus could see her lips moving silently, as if she were memorizing complex data or working through difficult calculations. There was something about her posture and bearing that reminded Marcus of the intelligence analysts he had worked with during his military career. She had that same focused intensity, that same way of holding herself that spoke of a mind constantly working, constantly processing information and looking for patterns that others might miss. The other Zephyrian females occasionally glanced back at her, with expressions that Marcus recognized as contempt or disgust. When one of the golden-skinned beauties whispered something to her companion while looking in the direction of the female, in the back both of them laughed in a way that was clearly mocking. Even among her own people, this scarred and plain female was an outcast. "Captain Chen," a voice beside him said, breaking his concentration. He turned to see Admiral Torres, the leader of the human delegation, standing with his own chosen partner already on his arm. The Zephyrian female beside Torres was stunning, even by the impossibly high standards of her species, with skin that seemed to capture and reflect every color in the visible spectrum. "You need to make your selection. The ceremony cannot proceed until all 12 partnerships are formed." Marcus nodded and looked back toward the front of the hall where the remaining beautiful Zephyrian females waited. There were still more than enough gorgeous options for him to choose from. Any one of them would be considered a prize beyond measure by human standards. They were all looking at him now with expressions of hope and desire, their luminous eyes promising companionship and pleasure that could make a man forget everything else in the universe. But his gaze kept drifting back to the female in the shadows. She had not once looked up from her data pad during the entire ceremony. She seemed completely unaware that she was even in the same room as the selection process. Or perhaps she was simply realistic about her chances and had already accepted that no human male would choose her over the goddesses standing in the front rows. Marcus found himself walking, not toward the front of the hall where beauty and perfection waited, but toward the back where shadows and solitude held court. The conversations in the hall gradually died down as people realized what he was doing. He could hear whispers and murmurs of confusion from both humans and Zephyrians as he passed by female after female who could have graced the cover of any magazine or starred in any man's fantasies. The scarred female finally looked up from her datapad as Marcus approached. Her eyes were not the mesmerizing violet or emerald of her sisters, but a more ordinary brown color that reminded him of earth and growing things. But there was an intelligence in those eyes that was sharp and clear, untainted by the dreamy, almost drugged quality he had noticed in the gazes of the other Zephyrian females. Marcus stopped directly in front of her and extended his hand in the formal gesture that would indicate his choice. The hall fell completely silent, except for the soft humming of the ship's engines and life support systems. He could feel the weight of dozens of stairs boring into his back, could practically hear the thoughts racing through the minds of everyone present. The scarred female looked at his outstretched hand with an expression of complete shock. For a moment she did not move at all. Then she slowly reached out and placed her own hand in his. Her skin was warm and dry, with calluses that spoke of hard work and practical activities rather than the soft perfection of pampered beauty. As their hands touched, she leaned forward slightly and spoke in a voice that was barely above a whisper. Unlike the musical tones of her sisters, her voice was rougher, more human-like in its inflection. But her words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "You don't understand what you've just done, human," she said. Her brown eyes suddenly filled with something that looked like fear mixed with desperate hope. "You may have doomed us all, or saved everyone." Part 2. Her guards aimed at me. Then the alien princess saw her daughters behind me. And Froze Princess Lyrelay stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the massive space station grow larger on the main viewing screen. Corvash Prime looked like a tumor growing from the surface of the asteroid, its metal structures twisted and dark against the starfield. She had never imagined she would willingly come to such a place, but desperate times called for desperate measures. 3 days ago, her intelligence network had finally tracked down the human mercenary who had stolen her daughters. The trail had been cold for weeks, with false leads and dead ends at every turn. Her brother Corvox had told her to accept that Zira and Naya were gone forever, that pursuing them would only bring more pain. But Lyrelay could not give up hope. They were her children, the light of her world, and she would tear the galaxy apart to find them. The human was named Marcus Chen, and his reputation preceded him. Intelligence reports painted him as a violent killer who took any job for the right price. He had fought in border wars, eliminated political targets, and destroyed ships full of innocent people. The fact that such a creature had taken her precious daughters made Lyrelay's blood burn with rage that threatened to consume her entirely. Standing behind her were 7 of her finest guards, warriors who had served the royal family for generations. Each stood over 7 feet tall, their bodies covered in armor that shimmered with energy fields. They carried plasma rifles that could cut through ship hulls and had trained their entire lives to protect the royal bloodline. If the human mercenary thought he could ransom her children back to her, he would learn the price of threatening a Zephyrian princess. Commander Thale, the oldest and most experienced of her guards, approached her with careful steps. His weathered face showed concern as he looked at his princess. "Your Highness," he said softly, "perhaps we should reconsider this approach. If the human sees our warships, he might harm the young ones out of desperation." Lyra Lee's wings fluttered, with barely controlled emotion. "He is a mercenary, Thale. He took my daughters for money, nothing more. We will give him one chance to return them peacefully. If he refuses—" She did not finish the sentence, but her meaning was clear enough. The docking bay of Corvox Prime was a chaotic place filled with beings from dozens of different worlds. Merchants hawked their goods while smugglers whispered deals in dark corners. The air was thick with smoke and strange odors that made Lyra Lee's sensitive nose wrinkle in disgust. This was not a place where royal children should ever have been brought. Lyra Lee moved through the crowd with her guards forming a protective circle around her. Their presence caused beings to scatter out of their path, unwilling to risk conflict with armed Zephyrian warriors. Word spread quickly through the station that royalty had arrived, and soon the central plaza was surrounded by curious onlookers who pressed against the barriers to see what would happen. The human was waiting for them in the center of the plaza, exactly as intelligence had predicted he would be. Marcus Chen looked every bit the killer that his files described. His armor was scarred from countless battles, and his weapons were worn from heavy use. He stood with the relaxed posture of someone who had faced death many times and was no longer impressed by it. But something was wrong with the scene. Lyra Lee had expected to see her daughters bound or caged, held as hostages to ensure the human's safety. Instead, she could see no sign of them at all. Her heart began to race as terrible possibilities filled her mind. Had he already sold them? Were they hidden somewhere else? Had he done something even worse? "You are Princess Lyra Lee," Marcus said in accented Zephyrian. His pronunciation was rough but understandable. "I have something that belongs to you." The guards raised their weapons. Immediately, energy cells charging with high-pitched whines that cut through the noise of the crowd. Lyra Lee felt her control slipping as rage and fear warred within her. "Where are my daughters?" she demanded, her voice echoing off the metal walls of the plaza. Marcus did not seem intimidated by the weapons pointed at him. "They are safe," he said simply. "They have been through enough fear. I will not let them see more violence if I can prevent it." Commander Thale stepped forward, his plasma rifle aimed directly at the human's chest. "You will produce the royal children immediately, or you will die where you stand." For a moment, the plaza fell completely silent. Even the background noise of the station seemed to fade away as hundreds of beings waited to see what would happen next. Lyra Lee raised her hand, ready to give the signal that would end the human's life and hopefully lead them to her daughters. Then she heard it, a soft chirping sound that was more beautiful than any music ever created. Her heart stopped as 2 small figures appeared from behind Marcus, peeking around his armored legs with curious eyes. Zira and Naya looked exactly as they had the day they were taken, their crystal skin unmarked and their delicate wings folded neatly against their backs. The sight was impossible to process. Her daughters were not cowering in fear or crying for rescue. Instead, they were hiding behind the human mercenary as if he was their protector. Naya, her youngest, had one small hand wrapped around Marcus's armored forearm, while Zira pressed against his other side and watched her mother with expression that seemed almost confused. Lyra Lee's raised hand trembled as her mind struggled to understand what she was seeing. This was not how hostages behaved with their captors. This was how children acted when they felt safe and protected. The human was not holding them prisoner. He was shielding them from a room full of armed warriors who had weapons pointed in their direction. "Mama?" Zira called out in their musical language. "Why do the guards have their weapons out? Is the kind warrior man in trouble?" The words hit Lyra Lee like physical blows. Kind warrior man. Her daughter was calling the scarred human killer a kind warrior man. Naya peeked out further from behind Marcus and chirped softly. He fought the bad scent people who hurt us, Mama. He made them go away. Marcus slowly reached up and began to remove his helmet, his movements careful and deliberate to avoid startling anyone. When his face was revealed, Lyrelai saw something she had not expected. His features were marked by countless battles, with scars running across his jaw and forehead. But his eyes, focused on her daughters with clear concern, held no cruelty or violence. They were the eyes of someone who genuinely cared about the safety of the children behind him. Your daughters have seen enough violence, Marcus said quietly. I would prefer they do not see more today. Commander Thale kept his weapon trained on the human, but looked to his princess for guidance. The other guards were equally confused, unsure how to handle a situation where the supposed kidnapper was protecting the victims from their own rescue force. The crowd around the plaza had grown larger as word spread through the station. Beings of dozens of different species watched the standoff with fascination. Many of them dealt in violence and cruelty as part of their daily business, but even they seemed to recognize that something unusual was happening. Lyrelai found her voice at last, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. You rescued them. Marcus nodded once. A friend of theirs asked me to find them. I gave my word that I would bring them home safely. The princess felt her worldview shifting like tectonic plates beneath an earthquake. Everything she had been told about this human was wrong. He was not a kidnapper or a child trafficker. He was exactly what her daughters had called him, a warrior who had fought to protect the innocent. Slowly, carefully, she lowered her hand. Part 3. Her guards aimed at me. Then the alien princess saw her daughters behind me and froze. The silence in the plaza stretched like a wire pulled too tight, ready to snap at any moment. Princess Lyrelai stared at her daughters, trying to understand how everything she had believed could be so completely wrong. The human mercenary stood perfectly still, his scarred face calm despite having 7 plasma rifles pointed at his chest. Behind him, Zira and Naya watched their mother with growing confusion. Commander Thale's voice cut through the quiet. Your Highness, what are your orders? Lyrelai could not answer immediately. Her mind was spinning with questions that had no easy answers. If Marcus Chen had not kidnapped her daughters, then who had? Why were they in a slave market? And why had her intelligence sources painted this human as a ruthless killer when her own children clearly trusted him with their lives? Naya, the younger of her daughters, stepped out from behind Marcus completely. Her small wings fluttered with nervous energy as she looked between her mother and the guards. Mama, she said in their musical language, why are you angry with the nice human? He saved us from the cage people. The word cage hit Lyrelai like a physical blow. Cage? She whispered, switching to galactic standards so Marcus could understand. You were kept in cages? Zira nodded, her large eyes filling with tears at the memory. Bad people put us in a small cage with other sad beings. They said they were going to sell us to work in dark places where the air hurts to breathe. But the warrior man came and opened the door. He carried us when we were too scared to walk. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, clearly not enjoying being the center of attention. Your Highness, he said to Lyrelai, perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private. Your daughters have been through enough trauma without having it discussed in front of strangers. For the first time, Lyrelai really looked at the crowd that had gathered around them. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species had pressed close to watch the confrontation. Many of them were recording the scene with various devices, no doubt planning to sell the footage to news networks across the galaxy. Her daughter's ordeal was becoming entertainment for criminals and pirates. Lower your weapons, she commanded her guards. The plasma rifles powered down with disappointed whines, though the warriors kept them ready to fire at a moment's notice. Clear this area. I want everyone except essential personnel to leave immediately. Commander Thale began barking orders in the Zephyrian military language. Station security, eager to avoid conflict with royal guards, began pushing the crowd back. Within minutes, the plaza was nearly empty except for Lyrelai, her guards, Marcus, and the 2 children. Lirelei approached slowly, her movements careful and non-threatening. She had learned long ago that frightened children needed gentle handling, even when those children were her own. As she drew closer, she could see details that made her heart ache. Both girls were thinner than they should be, and there were small bruises on their arms where rough hands had grabbed them. Their clothes were dirty and torn, and their beautiful wings had small cuts along the edges. "My precious ones," she whispered, kneeling down to their level. "I am so sorry this happened to you. I searched everywhere, but I could not find you." Zira ran to her mother first, throwing her small arms around Lyralei's neck. The princess held her daughter close, breathing in the familiar scent of crystal flowers that all young Zephyrians carried. Naya followed a moment later, and for a brief time, the plaza was filled with the sound of reunion and relief. But even as she held her daughters, Lyralei's eyes remained on Marcus. The human had stepped back to give them privacy, his hands clasped behind his back in a respectful posture. Everything about his body language suggested someone who was genuinely happy to see a family reunited. "Tell me what happened," Lyralei said to her daughters, though she continued to watch Marcus. "Tell me everything from the beginning." The story that emerged was worse than her darkest nightmares. Zira and Naya had been playing in the royal gardens when armed figures in dark armor had appeared. The children had been drugged and taken while their guards lay unconscious. They had awakened in a cargo ship filled with other captured beings, all destined for various forms of slavery throughout the galaxy. The cage people said we were special. "Because we were little and pretty," Naya said, her voice small and frightened. "They said the mining bosses would pay extra for workers who looked like us because it would make the other slaves work harder to protect us." Lyrelei felt rage building in her chest like a star going supernova. The idea of her daughters being used as leverage against other slaves was beyond monstrous. But as terrible as their story was, she noticed something important. Throughout their ordeal, they spoke of Marcus with only gratitude and affection. "The warrior man fought many bad people to get us out," Zira continued. "When the alarm started, making noise, he picked us both up and ran very fast through scary tunnels. He never let go of us even when the laser beams were flying everywhere." Marcus cleared his throat softly. "Your Highness, if I may explain how I became involved?" Lyrelei nodded, settling her daughters more comfortably in her arms. She was beginning to suspect that this human had a story of his own to tell. 3 weeks ago, I was on Tertius 7 when a Zephyrian diplomat found me. He was dying from wounds he had received trying to investigate your daughter's disappearance. With his last breath, he gave me a data chip containing information about where they were being held. He begged me to save them. The princess felt her breath catch. "Which diplomat?" "He said his name was Ambassador Korath. He mentioned that he had served your family for many years." Lyralei's wings drooped with grief. Korath had been her father's closest friend and had helped raise her when she was young. The fact that he had died trying to save her daughters made his loss even more painful. But it also explained how Marcus had known to look for them. "Korath was a good man," she said quietly. "He would not have trusted just anyone with such a task." "Why did he choose you?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. "Humans have a reputation for being unpredictable," he said finally. "But we also have a reputation for protecting children, regardless of what species they belong to. The ambassador said he needed someone who would not give up, even if the job became dangerous or unprofitable." Around the plaza, Lyralei's guards were listening to every word. She could see the confusion on their faces as they tried to reconcile what they were hearing with what they had been told about humans. In Zephyrian culture, loyalty and protection were earned through blood ties and ancient oaths. The idea that a complete stranger would risk his life for children he had never met was difficult for them to understand. But Lyrelei was beginning to understand something important about this scarred human warrior. He had not saved her daughters for money or glory. He had done it because someone had asked him to help, and helping was simply what he did. "You could have demanded payment," she said. "You could have contacted me and arranged a ransom. Why did you simply bring them back?" Marcus looked down at Zira and Naya, who were watching him with adoring eyes. "Because they were afraid," he said simply. and because going home to their mother was what they wanted most in the world. For the first time since her daughters had been taken, Princess Lyrelei felt something other than rage and fear. She felt hope that there might be more good in the galaxy than she had dared to believe. Part 4. Her guards aimed at me. Then the alien princess saw her daughters behind me and froze. The peaceful moment in the plaza was shattered by the sound of approaching ships. Princess Lyrelei looked up to see 3 Zephyrian warships dropping out of hyperspace, their hulls gleaming silver against the starfield. But something was wrong with their formation. These were not her ships returning from patrol. These vessels bore the royal crest of her brother, Prince Corvox. Commander Thale immediately activated his communication device. Princess, we are receiving an incoming transmission from the lead ship. Prince Corvox wishes to speak with you directly. Lyrelei felt her blood turn to ice water in her veins. Her brother arriving here now could only mean one thing. Somehow he had discovered her location and the fact that her daughters were still alive. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. Mama, Zira whispered, pressing closer to her mother's side. Who are those ships? Why do they look angry? Marcus had noticed the change in atmosphere immediately. His hand moved instinctively toward his weapon, though he was careful not to draw it with the children so close. Your Highness, he said quietly. Is there something I should know about those ships? Before Lyrelei could answer, Prince Corvox's voice filled the plaza through the communication system. His tone was smooth and cultured, but there was steel underneath the silk. My dear sister, he said, how wonderful to see you again, and how surprising to discover that your daughters are still alive after all. The words confirmed Lyrelei's worst fears. Her brother had known all along that Zira and Naya were alive. He had probably been the one who arranged for their capture in the first place. The realization hit her like a physical blow, stealing her breath and making her legs weak. Marcus stepped forward, positioning himself between the children and the communication device. Princess, he said urgently, we need to leave this station immediately. Leave? Commander Thale looked confused. Your Highness, Prince Corvox's family. Surely we can resolve any misunderstanding through discussion. Lyrelei wished she could share her guard's optimism, but she knew her brother too well. Corvox had always been jealous of her position as heir to the throne. Their father had chosen her because she was older and had shown greater wisdom in matters of state, but Corvox had never accepted that decision gracefully. There is no misunderstanding, Thale, she said quietly. My brother arranged for my daughters to disappear so that his own children would be next in line for the throne. He probably told the council that grief had driven me mad, that I was unfit to rule. The guards exchanged shocked glances. The idea that royal blood could turn against royal blood was almost unthinkable in their culture. But Marcus nodded grimly, as if such betrayal was exactly what he had expected. Humans deal with this kind of family politics all the time, he said. Brothers. Killing brothers for power is one of our oldest stories. Your brother will not let you or your daughters leave this station alive. Prince Corvox's voice came through the speakers again, still pleasant but with an edge of warning. Sister, I know you are listening. I have come to escort you home where you belong. The council is concerned about your mental state after the tragic loss of your children. They believe you need rest and medical care. He is going to declare me insane, Lyrelei realized. If I return with him, I will disappear into a medical facility and never be seen again. And my daughters. She could not finish the thought, but Marcus understood. He cannot leave witnesses who know the truth about what happened to them. The situation was becoming more dangerous by the minute. Corvox's ships were moving into position around the station, cutting off escape routes. Soon they would board Corvash Prime and take control of the docking bays. Once that happened, there would be no way to flee. We need to get to my ship, Marcus said. It is faster than anything your brother has, but we need to move now before he can establish a blockade. Commander Thale looked torn between loyalty to his princess and suspicion of the human. Your Highness, perhaps we should consider surrendering to Prince Corvox. If you are innocent of any wrongdoing, surely the truth will come out. The truth will be whatever my brother wants it to be, Lyrelay replied bitterly. He controls the council now. Any evidence that contradicts his version of events will disappear, and anyone who speaks against him will face charges of treason. Marcus was already moving, gathering supplies and checking his equipment. Your guards can come with us or stay here, but we are leaving in the next 10 minutes. After that, it will be too late. Naya tugged on her mother's robes. Mama, I do not like Uncle Corvox. He always looks at us like we are problems that need to be solved. The innocent words from her youngest daughter confirmed what Lyrelay already knew. Children often saw truth more clearly than adults because they had not yet learned to ignore their instincts. If Naya was afraid of Corvox, it was because he had given her reason to be afraid. Thyle, Lyrelay said to her guard commander, I need you to make a choice. You can follow your oath to protect the royal family, which means coming with me to keep my daughters safe, or you can follow the chain of command and surrender us to my brother. But you cannot do both. The old warrior looked at Zira and Naya, then back at his princess. His weathered face was filled with conflict, but when he spoke, his voice was steady. I swore an oath to protect the royal bloodline, Your Highness. That includes the young princesses. If you believe they are in danger from Prince Corvox, then my duty is clear. One by one, the other guards nodded their agreement. They might not understand everything that was happening, but they trusted their commander and their princess. More importantly, they could see the fear in the children's eyes when Corvox's name was mentioned. Marcus led them through the station's maintenance corridors, avoiding the main passages where Corvox's soldiers would soon be searching. The children stayed close to their mother, but they also kept looking back at the human warrior who had saved them. They seemed to understand that he was once again putting himself in danger to protect them. Why are you helping us? Lyrelay asked, as they moved through the narrow tunnels. You completed your mission when you rescued my daughters. You have no obligation to become involved in our family's political problems. Marcus paused at an intersection, checking for threats before answering. Your daughters asked me if they were safe now, he said. I told them I would not let anyone hurt them again. That promise does not end just because we found you. The simple statement revealed something profound about human nature that Lyrelay was only beginning to understand. When humans gave their word, especially when it involved protecting the innocent, they meant it in a way that transcended logic or self-interest. They reached Marcus's ship just as alarms began sounding throughout the station. Prince Corvox's soldiers were boarding Corvash Prime, and it would not be long before they found the empty plaza where the confrontation had taken place. Everyone aboard, Marcus ordered, sealing the ship's doors behind them. Princess, you might want to strap your daughters in securely. This is going to be a rough ride. As the engines powered up, Lyrelay held Zira and Naya close and realized that their troubles were just beginning. But for the first time since her daughters had been taken, she felt hope that they might actually survive what was coming. Part 1. Her guards aimed at me. Then the alien princess saw her daughters behind me, and froze. Captain Marcus Chen pressed his back against the cold metal wall and checked his rifle for the third time in 10 minutes. The weapon hummed softly with charged energy cells, ready to fire at anything that moved through the shadowy corridors of Corvash Prime Station. He had been planning this mission for weeks, but nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to discover in the deepest levels of the most notorious slave market in the galaxy. Marcus was not like most mercenaries who worked the Outer Rim. While others took jobs for money and asked no questions, he had rules that other humans understood, but aliens found strange. He would not traffic sentient beings. He would not harm children. He would not leave innocent people to suffer when he had the power to help them. These rules had cost him profitable contracts, but they helped him sleep at night in a universe that seemed determined to crush anything good and decent. The information had come from a dying Zephyrian diplomat 3 weeks ago on a backwater mining planet. The alien had grabbed Marcus with hands that sparkled like crystal in the dim light of the medical bay. His voice was weak but desperate as he whispered about 2 young ones taken from their home world and sold to the worst kind of buyers. The diplomat pressed a data chip into Marcus's palm and begged him to save them before closing his eyes forever. Marcus had spent days studying the chip. It contained shipping manifests, security codes, and most importantly, the location where the children were being held before their final sale. Corvox Prime was a space station built inside a massive asteroid, hidden in a system controlled by criminals and traitors who dealt in things decent people refused to touch. Getting in would be hard enough. Getting out alive with 2 alien children would be nearly impossible. The corridors of the station were filled with beings from dozens of different species. Marcus kept his head down and his rifle hidden beneath a long coat as he moved through the crowd. Corvoxi traders with their multiple arms gestured wildly at potential buyers. Tall Vorthans with scaled skin examined various goods with cold, calculating eyes. Smaller species scurried between the larger ones, carrying messages and conducting business in whispered conversations. The deeper Marcus went into the station, the worse the smell became. It was a mixture of unwashed bodies, fear, and something else he could not identify. The lighting grew dimmer and the corridors narrower until he found himself in a section of the station that most visitors never saw. Here, behind reinforced doors and energy barriers, was where the real business of Corvox Prime took place. Marcus found the holding area exactly where the data chip said it would be. Through a small window in the door, he could see rows of cages containing beings from across the galaxy. Most were adults who had been captured during raids or sold by their own people for various crimes. But in the far corner, in a cage barely large enough for one adult, were 2 small figures huddled together. The Zephyrian children were even younger than Marcus had expected. They could not have been more than 6 or 7 years old by human standards. Their skin had the same crystal-like quality as the diplomat who had died, but where his had been dim with age and injury, theirs sparkled with youth and health. Delicate wings like those of butterflies folded against their backs, and their large eyes were filled with tears that caught the light like liquid diamonds. Marcus felt something twist in his chest as he watched them. They were holding each other and making soft, chirping sounds that he assumed was their way of crying. One of the children, slightly larger than the other, was stroking the smaller one's hair and whispering in their musical language. Even in their terror, they were trying to comfort each other. The door's security system was more advanced than Marcus had hoped, but he had come prepared. Human technology might not be the most elegant in the galaxy, but it had a reputation for being reliable and adaptable. The small device he attached to the lock began working immediately, sending electrical pulses through the security circuits until they overloaded and failed. When the door slid open, every being in the holding area looked up at him. Some cowered, in the back of their cages, afraid that their situation was about to become worse. Others pressed against the bars, hoping for rescue or at least a quick death. The Zephyrian children stopped their crying and stared at Marcus with wide, frightened eyes. Marcus approached their cage slowly, keeping his movements calm and non-threatening. He had learned a few words of the Zephyrian language from translation programs, though he was sure his pronunciation was terrible. "I am friend," he said softly, the alien words feeling clumsy in his mouth. "I am here to help." The larger child said something to the smaller one in their own language, then looked back at Marcus. "You are human," she said in accented but clear galactic standard. "Humans are warriors. Are you here to hurt us?" Marcus felt his heart break a little more. "No," he said, kneeling down so he was at their eye level. "I am here to take you home. A friend of yours asked me to find you." He began working on the lock of their cage, his hands steady despite the emotions churning inside him. The cage door opened with a soft click, and Marcus stepped back to give the children space. They did not run to him immediately, which showed they were smart as well as brave. The larger child took the smaller one's hand and they approached Marcus cautiously. "What are your names?" Marcus asked as he quickly checked them for injuries. He could see bruises on their arms and small cuts on their wings, but nothing that looked serious enough to prevent them from moving quickly. "I am Zira," said the larger child. "This is my sister Naya. Are you really going to take us away from here?" "Yes," Marcus said firmly. "But we need to move fast. Can you both walk?" Before the children could answer, an alarm began blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed in the corridors and Marcus could hear the sound of heavy boots running in their direction. Someone had discovered that the holding area had been breached. Marcus quickly freed several other prisoners to create confusion, then scooped up both Zephyrian children in his arms. They were lighter than human children would have been, their bones hollow like those of birds to support their wings in flight. Zira wrapped her arms around his neck while Naya clung to his chest, both of them trusting him completely despite having just met him. The corridors filled with smoke as Marcus made his way toward the docking bay where his ship waited. Security forces were converging on the area, but the freed prisoners had scattered in all directions, making it difficult to track any single person. Marcus used the chaos to his advantage, moving through maintenance shafts and service tunnels that most species would find too cramped to navigate. Station security forces were firing energy weapons at anything that moved, and Marcus had to dive behind cargo containers several times to avoid being hit. The children never cried out or complained, even when the situation became most dangerous. They seemed to understand that their lives depended on staying quiet and following his lead. Marcus reached his ship just as the first security forces arrived at the docking bay. His vessel was a modified cargo hauler that looked unremarkable from the outside, but had been equipped with military-grade shields and weapon systems. As he strapped the children into safety harnesses, Zira looked up at him with those large, trusting eyes. "Are we safe now?" she asked. Marcus started the engines and began the launch sequence. "Not yet," he said honestly. "But I promise you this. I will not let anyone hurt you again." As they lifted off from Corvash Prime, Marcus had no idea that he was carrying the daughters of Princess Lyrelei, one of the most powerful rulers in the galaxy. He only knew that two innocent children needed protection, and he was the only one who could provide it.